Irene White's daughter Jennifer, seen here in the middle, leaving court after she said the impact of her mother's death would continue to traumatise her and her two younger siblings for the rest of their lives. In her victim impact statement, she said her mother was set upon in her own home, where she was savagely attacked and murdered. She was giving evidence just before a second man, 47-year-old Niall Power, who had pleaded guilty today to her mother's murder, was jailed for life. Irene White's ex-husband Alan was also in court for today's hearing, and he said they had lived in hope for years that her killer would come forward. The 43-year-old separated mother of three was stabbed 34 times in her family home, the Ice House on Demesne Road in Dundalk, on the 6th of April 2005. She had dropped her children to school that morning and was last seen between 9 and 10. Her mother, Maureen McBride, found her daughter's body at 12:30 that afternoon in a pool of blood. The court heard the woman died 6 months later of a broken heart on Irene's birthday. Detective Mick Sheridan in the middle told the court today that Niall Power handed himself into Dundalk Garda station the day after 35-year-old history student Anthony Lamb from Castleblaney in Monaghan was jailed for life for stabbing Irene White to death at her home. Power, now 47, said he wanted to get this off his chest and wanted to put his hands up. He told them that a third man, who was not before the court, asked him in 2003 or 2004 to sort her out, referring to Irene White. He said he understood that the man wanted her dead and he was placed under pressure to get it done. He said he was the middleman, that Anthony Lamb told him he could get the job done for him. Power pleaded guilty today and apologised to Irene White's family through his lawyer. Irene's sister Anne, who has constantly campaigned for justice for her sister, wasn't in court today as she's seriously ill. A solicitor for her and her husband Kenny spoke on their behalf, asking the Gardaí to prosecute the third man.
We have the killer, we have the so-called middleman, but we've yet to find and have prosecuted the mastermind.
You're very welcome. Mick Rooney, investigative journalist. Radio Espial. This is a Radio Espial special. I just want to be clear. There's no timeline in this case. This case is now at a stage, quite an advanced stage. We are pretty much done with the I suppose the what, the where, the when. We're now on to the who and the why. As you will have seen from the thumbnail, this is the Irene White murder case. Let's get straight on with it. You're not going to hear from me again. I will do some inserts at the end of this feature as a means of just updating where the case is. I'm just going to deliver a brief and then we're going to go straight into the feature. Irene White, née McBride, her family name, mother of three children, was 43 years old when she was murdered at her home on the 6th of April 2005. She had just driven back home from an early morning school run. Irene's mother, Maureen, aged 79, found her daughter's body lying in a pool of blood on the kitchen floor in the Ice House. That was the name of the house they lived in. Demesne Road, Dundalk. Irene's murder has been described as one of the most vicious killings of a woman in the Irish state. She had been stabbed 34 times and her throat was slit. Maureen, her mother, died 6 months later on Irene's 44th birthday. While initially parts of this case might seem similar to the case of Rachel O'Reilly, this one is about to get a whole lot more convoluted with a lot of twists and turns in it. Maureen lived at the rear of Irene's house in a mobile home. And like her daughter, she was vivacious and independent and would usually call into Irene each day around noon for tea and a chat. Noon to, I think, 12:30 was her usual time to call in. But she'd no idea of the scene that would confront her on the afternoon of April 6, 2005. Her daughter Irene had been brutally stabbed to death 2 hours earlier. She found the back door of the house open and slightly ajar when she entered. Irene had previously contacted the Gardaí over 15 times because she feared for her own safety following threats communicated to her. She had been directly told by a male known to her that you are to be murdered. Irene's murder was organised by a number of people. Some of the people responsible for Irene's murder have been caught, 2, but at least 3 others or more remain at large. Of those involved and convicted, Anthony Lamb was found guilty of murdering Irene on the 29th of January 2018 at the Central Criminal Court in Dublin. He stabbed Irene 34 times and cut her throat. Anne, Irene's sister, only discovered the extent of those horrific injuries inflicted on her sister by Anthony Lamb in court. Anthony Lamb stated he was following direct instructions through a middleman and was paid by someone known to Irene to carry out the murder. Lamb was at the time of the murder an alcoholic and drug user. He accepted an initial payment and further instalments of up to €30,000. Under Gardaí investigation, he revealed that there had been an aborted attempt to kill Irene in March or April of 2005. When asked why his murder attack became so bloodied and frenzied, he admitted that he was under instruction to deliver 2 stabs to Irene's heart, but it didn't seem to kill her and he panicked, fearing she might live and identify him. He delivered a further 32 stab wounds and fled the scene. He later fled to the UK with his girlfriend, trying to put his life back together, but was always haunted by his conscience. Neil Power handed himself into the Garda station in Dundalk a day after Anthony Lamb's conviction in 2018. He too claimed that he came forward because he feared for his life following Lamb's conviction, and it was clear he was also implicated. He was convicted on July 8, 2019. At trial, he insisted again that he was the middleman and the arrangement for Irene's murder was on someone else's behalf by a person known to him, and that initial alibis provided to Gardaí were entirely fabricated as part of the overall murder plan. In this case, the following suspects remain at large: those who planned and paid for the murder, those who provided false alibis, getaway vehicles, and destroyed evidence, that is, the washing of clothes, the disposal of a weapon, in this case a knife 6 to 9 inches long, those who may be charged for withholding information and knew a serious crime was about to be committed. 6 to 7 people, both men and women, are known to the Gardaí and are thought to have participated in Irene's murder. This is the case of the planned murder of Irene White and the tracking conviction of all of the people involved. Some of them in this piece that you're going to see will be named Anthony Lamb and Niall Power. Others will be indirectly referred to and have yet to be convicted for their involvement, and I want you to remember that. That's important. Irene, following many threats, named her ultimate mastermind killer in her private diary. Gardaí have that diary in their book of evidence submitted to the DPP for prosecution. DPP, Department of Public Prosecution. Let's go to our feature. I'll have some qualifications and some text towards the end. I'll see you in the next episode. God bless, and God bless to Irene's family.
The 6th of April 2005, and mother of 3, Irene White, returns home after leaving her children to school. But as she goes about her daily business on this seemingly ordinary Wednesday morning, a vicious attacker is waiting to strike.
The body of Irene White was found by her mother, lying in a pool of blood in the kitchen of her home here at Demesne Road. She'd been stabbed several times.
Well, this was a particularly horrific, brutal killing of a young woman who lived here in Dundalk. There are no definite lines of inquiry. A number of avenues are being explored, and as the investigation progresses, we hope to focus it more.
Residents in the area say they're heartbroken at the tragedy and worried that the killer or killers may strike again.
On the 6th of April 2005, the brutal murder of Irene White stunned the community of Dundalk. 7 years later, the investigation to find whoever is responsible continues through the work of the Garda Serious Crime Review Team.
The purpose of the Serious Crime Review Team is to review unsolved homicides committed within the state between 1980 and right up to today's date. The case of Irene White came to our attention as a result of a preliminary review that we conducted. We decided that it merited a full review of the case, and that's exactly where we're at the moment. We're carrying out a review in relation to the investigation.
Irene White was born Irene McBride in 1961 and spent her comfortable childhood years in Omeath, County Louth.
Irene was just a year and 5 months younger than me, and we had a very nice country upbringing, lived by the sea and just really enjoyed life together.
We were brought up together. We lived beside each other in Omeath. We went to school together, so we were always friends from we were babies. My mother would look after them, and then the same for me as well. You know, Maureen would look after me. You know, we were always together, the 3 of us.
Even as teenagers, you know, going into Dundalk or going into Newry or whatever for, you know, Good Friday is the particular day I actually remember, because every Good Friday myself and Irene and Anya, we were in the bars in Newry, because as heathens there was no bars open in the south, so into the north we would go.
She could see fun in everything. You know, it could be the most dreadful situation you'd be in, and Irene would just get you out of it. She would laugh, you know.
She was just so funny.
Life moved on, and Irene had her first child.
And then your life takes on a whole different frame then. You bring up your children and you don't have as much contact. She had Jennifer in a Montessori school in Dundalk, and she would have been about 26.
She wasn't married, but she was quite happy then. They set up home together, and Jennifer was a beautiful baby, but it didn't work out, so they split up amicably.
She was very happy, Irene, actually, when she was on her own and with Jennifer as a young child, because she had her own home. Beautiful, beautiful place in Ashbrook in Dundalk. It was absolutely gorgeous, and she was there with her child, and that was her whole life, was Jennifer, and working and just being herself.
I personally knew Irene myself. I was based in Omeath, where she was from, and I knew her as a young girl growing up. And Irene would have been a very vivacious, bubbly girl with an outgoing personality. She was involved in pub drama and was a well-known person and a well-known character, and always had a word for everybody.
Through the amateur dramatics she was involved in, Irene met her future husband, Alan White, and moved with Jennifer into the distinctive ice house to live with him. They were married a year later.
There was a glow to her face. She was so happy. You know, this is it for me. She said, I'm settled down now. And then she had 2 more children, and, you know, she always kept in touch with her. She'd meet up for a drink, or she would, you know, go out to a club or whatever. You know, she'd do a bit of part-time work in the bar as well at night, but that was more for fun than anything, you know. She just loved being with people and showing off, and I personally thought she was very happy, you know, really, really happy.
Everything seemed to be okay on the front, but people do that with their lives, you know. You don't always know what's going on inside, because Irene was the kind that would always portray everything was wonderful, and maybe I think things were not going too well in her marriage, and there's an embarrassment attached to, you know, if the home isn't happy, basically.
Sometimes Irene wouldn't want to admit that she failed at something. You know, she'd stand up for herself very well. She was a very strong woman, very strong.
Irene showed this strength after her marriage broke down, as she endeavoured to find a new home for herself and her 3 children.
There were plans in place that they were going to sell Ice House and split the proceeds, so she was very much looking forward at that stage.
We established that Irene had viewed houses in the Dundalk area, and she was intent on moving house, and had indicated to various auctioneers her intention to buy a house.
She was full of beans. She was going up to the RDS to look at Ideal Home exhibition, and she was all doing that yummy mummy stuff, you know. As I said, we all thought she was happy.
But Irene's positivity in creating a new future for herself and her children was severely challenged in the weeks leading up to her murder, when she began to receive threats to her safety.
Irene was a very well-liked person in the Dundalk area, but certainly in a period of time and in a number of days prior to her death, she did express concerns for her own personal safety.
Irene was actually in fear of her life at this point. I have a copy of Irene's diaries, and according to the diary, Irene said that somebody had said to her that you will not know the hour of the day, but I will get you and I will have an alibi.
Joe, thanks for coming to meet me. I really do appreciate it.
She was a very, very clever lady, so she was. So she knew that she had to tell people what was happening.
I suppose hindsight is a dreadful thing, but, you know, we didn't take her seriously enough.
It's just me being paranoid, isn't it? Do you think?
I can't imagine what she was going through. I can't imagine.
Was she thinking that I'm going to be murdered today, maybe tomorrow, or maybe the next day, or when am I going to be killed? This is terrible.
And it wasn't long before the threats became brutal reality.
Irene's movements in the hours leading up to her murder are just normal movements, the things that parents would do on school runs any given day.
She was getting her 2 youngest children ready for school, and her eldest daughter, Jennifer, was getting herself ready. And typical of a young teenager, she was longer than the rest of them, and Jennifer was the last to leave the house. She pulled the door after, ensuring that the door was locked.
They all loaded up into the car. Sometime in and around 20 to 9, quarter to 9, it seems that they left Ice House and they headed off.
She left in her car, a maroon Mazda 94 LH 245, from the rear of Ice House, and drove down to St Mary's College, where Jennifer actually went to school. She stopped there and she dropped Jennifer at school there.
And then Irene's son and younger daughter, who were just 6 and 4 years old, were heading to Railton Amara Primary School in Dundalk. So Irene did that drop as well, and she would have passed time of day with some people, but nothing seems out of the ordinary.
She spoke to another parent there, and they spoke about general things about children and bringing them up, and she spoke about moving house and that she had looked at houses.
You know, she was in good form. She was happy to be moving on with her life.
But back at Ice House, plans were afoot that would turn a routine Wednesday morning into the beginning of an ongoing nightmare.
We have established from our investigation that Irene returned home at approximately 9:50 a.m. on the morning of the murder.
Well, there are a number of scenarios that you could consider. One would be that the person or persons who killed Irene had got in the back door unknown to her and then surprised her, or else the person that was involved had actually lain in wait.
We could consider the scenario that Irene arrives home, puts down whatever belongings she may have brought with her. She may make her way straight to the kitchen to maybe clean up after the breakfast that they've had earlier that day, and so she's doing some type of washing at the sink, and she never saw what was coming. It would seem a very likely scenario that the killer approached her from behind.
There was actually a broken glass on the floor beside her. She had been washing that glass when she was attacked.
This was a very vicious, very violent attack, which would have lasted quite a number of seconds, perhaps minutes.
She certainly had little or no opportunity to defend herself, and from the nature of the injuries, I would have little doubt, and in fact I have no doubt, that the person who entered the house and assaulted Irene, their motive was to absolutely to kill Irene that morning.
Irene White was brutally killed in the kitchen of her home in Dundalk on the 6th of April 2005. 7 years later, the investigation into her murder is very much open and active. But on that fateful morning, Irene's friends and family were about to receive the tragic news.
I was just lying on top of the bed chatting to my husband, and a bird hit the window with a real big bang, and I said, God, that's really unusual, and that actually happened at 12:15. Then at 3:25, Irene's best friend Demesne Road rang me and said, Anne, is something terrible's happened. Immediately I thought it was my elderly mother.
Maureen, or Mo as she was known, had moved into a mobile home at the back of Ice House. So she was living in a property in the back garden, which was her own space, but very close to her daughter. And at that stage, Mo was 70 years old, and herself and Irene were very, very close.
My mother would come in every day at a specific time for her cup of tea, and she just loved a boiled egg or whatever, and Irene would have all this ready for her.
The first thing she notices that's just out of place is the back door is open. And given that Irene had previously spoken about concerns for her own safety and worries that she had, to see the back door open, maybe it was just, she wouldn't normally have the back door open like that.
And she came in, and Irene was in such a terribly, terribly brutalised way on that kitchen floor. Blood all over the floor. You know, the blood literally drained out of Irene's body. 8 pints of it, can you imagine? And my mother walked in on that. It killed her.
She managed to make her way out of the house in absolute terror and shock, and down to a local shop, people she knew just down the way, and somehow managed to say what she had just seen.
The Gardaí received a phone call from a local shopkeeper, and the local superintendent would have been notified, and he would then make the arrangements for the Garda Technical Bureau to come and examine the scene technically.
The findings of the Technical Bureau indicated that the attack had not been the result of a botched robbery.
All the windows, doors, access points to the house would have been technically examined by a person from ballistics, and there was no evidence found that the house was forcibly entered. Irene's handbag was hanging on the banister, and her phone and her wallet were in her bag at the time, and none of that had been removed.
The motive of robbery is ruled out in this case, and it would appear then that the clear motive that morning was to actually take the life of Irene White.
There were also a leading trail of footwear impressions which pointed towards a suspect fleeing the scene.
It's very clear that the killer left through the back door, because there was considerable blood markings going right out the door, where the killer had stepped in Irene's blood in the kitchen and then left through the back door. And the blood markings extend down the back garden and indicate a route going over a wall and going into Ice House Hill Park. It would seem that whoever the murderer is, that they knew a lot about the area, they knew a lot about the movements of different people, they knew about the maybe counter-surveillance work that they might need to do to get in and out of Ice House without being seen.
The certainly had some plan of action to exit from the house and go into the local park and get away from the scene, either on their own or certainly there is a distinct possibility that it was through the assistance of other people.
Hoping to confirm these suspicions, Gardaí conducted extensive interviews with locals.
In excess of 2,500 people were interviewed in relation to this murder. A total of 60 people who were either walking or jogging in the Icehouse Hill Park on that morning. And arising from those interviews, we have established that there were 3 people in the park that are not accounted for. And we would be anxious to trace those people.
They are very, very important. And what we are trying to do is to either implicate or eliminate these people.
The first person that we would be interested in was described as being between 5'5" and 5'8" in height, who was seen crossing Icehouse Hill Park towards Icehouse at 9:25 on the morning of the murder. And that person was wearing a 3/4 length green coat with a black scarf. The second person then is at 10:10 in the morning, and that person was coming in the opposite direction from Icehouse towards O'Hanlon Park entrance, and he was wearing a grey hoodie with the hood up over his head. We have a witness who has described a third person whom she's seen running from the direction of Icehouse, and he is described as being between 30 and 40 years of age, wearing a waist-length jacket, and he was wearing possibly a baseball cap, and she does recall seeing that person getting into a dark-coloured car adjacent to the entrance into the park.
Was there somebody in that car waiting? Was the car revving? Was it ready to take the killer away pretty quickly because the car was gone pretty quickly?
If that is the scenario, then there are at least one, if not a number of people who are in possession of information in relation to the death of Irene White.
We believe that the person who carried out the crime may have had bloodstained clothing when they left the scene. We're anxious to find out what happened to those clothes. Were they discarded? Were they washed? We're anxious to talk to family members or friends who may have noticed some particular incidents in relation to this person on the days following the incident. Was there a change of routine? Was there a change in their character? We're anxious to talk to anybody that may have noticed anything like that.
What we have seen over time is that people want to impart the information. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to deal with it in their mind, because they've lived with this over the years, and there is a certain amount of fear contained within their mental well-being that they will be in trouble. And what I would say here is, come to us, talk to us, and we can discuss the matter.
The reward is over €34,000, but that is for information on all of the conspirators who were involved in Irene's murder. That will be when they are convicted and jailed for the offence. In the end, I believe that there will be somebody who will divulge what's happened, because you cannot keep that knowledge. When you wake up in the morning, you see Irene in that kitchen, you go to sleep, close your eyes, you think of that.
What I would say is that if they do come forward and contact the Gardaí, that the information that they give to us will be treated with the strictest confidence, and they can be confident that we will meet with them, we will listen to them, and we will certainly take into account as to the reasons why they didn't or weren't able to come forward to help us originally at the time of the murder.
The investigation continues to gather evidence in the search for the person or persons who planned and executed Irene White's murder. The police and family believe that someone holds the key to bringing them to justice. Meanwhile, Irene's family are left with the aftermath of losing a loved one without any type of tangible resolution.
3 children were taken to school on that morning and never saw their mother again.
And for Irene's own mother, the months that followed the murder were haunted by the memory of finding her daughter's body on the kitchen floor of Icehouse.
They saw each other every day. And my mother would spend time with the children as well. I mean, if Irene had to go out in the evening in the car, my mother was there with the young children, minding them. It was just a close relationship always.
To find your daughter lying in a pool of blood, it must be horrendous. She was frustrated, very frustrated and angry and sad, and she was all over the place, and she just literally gave up. She gave up everything. She just gave up. She didn't want to live.
My mother died on the 22nd of October 2005, Irene's birthday. It's not just me who said this. Every person that comes up to me in Dundalk who knew my mother and Irene and the relationship they had, and of course everybody in Dundalk knows what's happened, believes wholeheartedly that this killed my mother.
Obviously, so far, the killer has got away with what he has done, and anybody who's given succour or comfort or false alibis or helped to destroy evidence or whatever, they have also got away with it so far. But that's not to say they're going to get away with it forever. And I think people turn on each other. It's a fact of life, and no more so than among killers and people who give comfort and solace to killers, that eventually they turn on each other because they realise that the net is closing in on them.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for attending Irene's 7th anniversary vigil.
This case is very much an open investigation. Somebody who is capable of such a brutal murder is out walking around the streets, and Anne, Irene's sister, cannot bring this to any sort of closure whatsoever until a person is made amenable for this horrific crime. And because of that, and because I suppose Irene was well known to us, we will continue to work to try and bring the perpetrators of this crime to justice.
The killers are out there. They live among us. And that is the message that Anne is getting out there, that whoever took Irene's life, for example, is still going about their daily business today. They're still living with what they did. They're still getting away with it. Are we going to let them get away with it?
The man who stands before this court, Niall Power, is not any stranger to our family, but is in fact a person who was at one time a close family friend and would have not only been trusted but also welcomed into our home, not only by myself and my siblings, but also by our mum.
The words of Jennifer McBride at the Central Criminal Court on Monday, as she laid bare the pain she, her brother Davin and sister Darina have endured since 2005, when their mother Irene was stabbed to death in the kitchen of their Dundalk home.
Okay, what are the address?
1-800-40-50-60. This month we have a number of current crimes and we're looking for your help. Starting with the death of Irene White, mother of 3 who was found fatally stabbed in her home just 3 weeks ago.
In 2005, a woman was fatally stabbed at her home in Dundalk. Her name was Irene White, 43 years old and mother to 3 children. 11 years on, nobody has been brought to justice. Irene's case remains open and her family in torment.
Following a review by the Garda Cold Case Unit and detectives in Dundalk, 2 men are now serving life sentences for murdering Irene White. One, the hitman. The other, the conduit, who says he paid the killer on behalf of a 3rd man.
On the 29th of January 2018, Anthony Lamb pleaded guilty to the murder of Irene White after a very protracted and intense investigation, and the Gardaí put all resources into it to get that far. The day after he was convicted and sentenced, Niall Power came to Dundalk Garda Station wishing to speak with me. I was working that day, and I was actually trying to juggle 4 murder investigations at that particular time, and I wasn't expecting him to come into the station, and I went down to see him, and he said he wanted to confess to his involvement in the murder of Irene White.
This is the second time that a person's conscience has kicked in this murder investigation, where a killer has ultimately pleaded guilty. Anthony Lamb, the man who actually stabbed Irene White, he pleaded guilty in January of last year, and now in July 2019, Niall Power, the man who describes himself as the middleman, he has pleaded guilty and has been jailed for life. Jennifer, when he said that word, guilty, what were you feeling?
There was a sense of relief for the reason that we were told to expect 3 to 4 weeks of a trial, and it was a lot of anxiety and what were we going to have to face and listen to and everything like that. So it was like, well, at least we know it's going to be a positive outcome in the right direction, like it's going to be the way we want it to go. So there was a sense of relief, but at the same time, like pain, anger, hurt, all different emotions, but I was happy to know that it was a guilty plea.
Irene's morning had begun as normal. She got her 3 children, aged 4, 6 and 17, up and ready for school.
The 6th of April 2005 started like any other day as we all set off together to school with Mum in our car.
Then they followed the road passing Carroll Village and the cinema.
I was first to be dropped off, and as I said goodbye to everyone, I did not realise that would be my last ever goodbye to my mum and also goodbye to my brother and sister for a long time.
Niall Power sat with his body arched away, so he wasn't facing towards most of the courtroom. When Jennifer McBride, Irene's daughter, was giving her victim impact statement, that's the way Niall Power was facing, up towards the witness box, but he kept his head bowed throughout all of Jennifer's victim impact statement. When you were giving your victim impact statement, it struck me that you were thinking of your brother and sister a lot.
I know. Like, I had 17 years. I have so many treasured memories all through the years. Like, my sister was 4 years old and my brother was 6, who's just after turning 6. Like, my memory is very sketchy when I was that age. So it breaks my heart that they don't have, like, such fresh memories and such many memories that I have. So it is heartbreaking. They missed out on so much. My mum was everything to me and to my brother and sister. Like, it's just heartbreaking to think that people in this day and age can go around and think that they can pay people off to kill a human being. It's horrible.
What came out in court this week was that Niall Power says he was the middleman in the murder of your mother. So the actual man who committed the murder in the kitchen of your home has been found guilty, has pleaded guilty. The middleman has pleaded guilty. There's still a third person out there who plotted and planned and wanted this to happen. That person is still at large.
People are calling it the mastermind, and he's the man behind the whole lot, and the ultimate goal would be to have him before the courts and charged. That would be the ultimate goal, yeah. Only then will I feel like I have got true justice for my mum, that she deserves.
To actually sit like this and do an interview like this can't be easy.
No, it's not.
Why do it?
Well, I've done this a few times now, and every time I have, it seems to have had a positive impact for the case, which is what it's about. We want answers and we want justice, and if anyone has any information, of course, please do come forward. Even if it seems so small to them, it could be huge. So that's why I do it.
We believe there's a third stage to go. Now, I'm not a member of An Garda Síochána anymore, but I have great faith in Detective Sergeant Michael Sheridan, who is leading that investigation at present. I have great faith in the investigation team, and I hope that they will bring it to a full conclusion.
She was stabbed multiple times in a frenzied, uncontrolled act of sheer brutality. She was then left to die helplessly and alone in a pool of her own blood on her kitchen floor. To even think of the torture our gentle, loving mum had to endure in the last moments of her life will haunt us forever.
Irene White was stabbed 34 times and her throat was cut. While Anthony Lamb and Niall Power are now serving life sentences, as of tonight, the third person involved in Irene White's murder, the so-called mastermind of this most horrific murder, remains at large.